When a Southwest flight was making its final descent into LAX on Sunday, pilots reported they had a close call at 4,000 feet. Listen to this audio obtained by NBC News.
One of those radio control helicopter things that went right over the top of us at 4,000.
Over the top of you at 4,000, roger that.
One of those remotely piloted deals.
Gotcha, the drone.
On the surface, it seems so trivial and maybe even a little bit amusing. The toys that have become something much more. Remote-controlled drones, buzzing everything from birthday parties to commercial airliners. And now a movement that seeks to ensure they cannot fly into your personal space. And there's more to this than just the occasional delivery of pizza or drinks. Our guest is special counsel in the litigation department of the New York law firm Kramer Levin. But more to the point, he is in charge of the firm's unmanned aircraft systems practice. Simply stated, he knows drones and the law. Let's welcome Brendan Schulman into MidPoint today. Brendan, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Ed.
Brendan, this caught our attention here right away. We're talking about no-fly zones over people's homes that they're now discussing. And we've had this discussion and heard somebody say, if I saw a drone over my house, I'd shoot it because it's actually right in my airspace. Is this a real thing and a real legal concern?
Well, there was a shoot down like that in New Jersey a few months ago. I think it's a concern primarily for privacy issues or perceived privacy issues, and the notion that one might be able to get people to restrict flying over a property is compelling. My understanding is that's currently a voluntary database.
How do you control that, though? Because these drones are everywhere. They're in parks, they're on streets, they're in shopping centers. Kids are using it around their house. So how do you then hold it down?
Well, these are actually a lot of fun. They're really remote control model aircraft. I think what we've seen is decades of self-regulation by hobbyists that has worked just fine. And to a certain extent, a lot of it is education. People are very compelled by the photography aspect. You can now take an aerial photograph of yourself or your house, and that's really what's driving a lot of the purchases. And I think people just need to think about where they're operating before they do.
Okay, full disclosure here now. Do you own one?
I own about 20.
Okay. How long have you had these? I mean, have you been on the cusp of this for years or just recently?
For 20 years, I've been building and flying what I used to call model aircraft and what people are now referring to as drones.
So with the drones then, because now you have the experience here, there are people, though, who say, if it's my home, my property, I own this square piece, so I should be able to protect the sky above me. All right, I know we're getting really into some interesting legal areas here, but can you? Can you control that? Can you at least say it's mine?
There's a really interesting and I think unresolved property rights issue here. If you go back to the beginning of the country, airspace was owned by the private property owner. There's Supreme Court cases on that. And when airplanes came along, the country had to figure out how to allow airplanes to fly across people's airspace without triggering claims. And we did that by basically separating the high navigable airspace from what's low to the ground. Now drones pose a tool that can be used at lower altitudes, and I think it really does raise a question about who owns the sky in the backyard. Is it still the property owner, or is it in some way regulated by the federal government, or is it something else?
Where are we sitting then on this sort of a decision?
Well, there's nothing pending in any court on that question. I think it's quite possible that as the technology advances and as people think about legal framework, that question will get tested. People will assert the right to use these devices in their own private airspace for commercial and other purposes. And at the same time, people will say, if you're flying one, you should keep it out of my property at low airspace. I think once you get above like 400 or 500 feet, that becomes the navigable airspace that the statutes say belongs to the public in terms of a right of transit. And so it's much harder to exclude drones from airspace once you get up to higher altitudes.
Are we looking at something, though, that would be completely impossible to regulate and also to legislate and watch, if you will, because we're talking 400 to 500 feet. Most people would know 4 to 5 feet above their own house, actually. So you're talking 400 to 500 feet. People would then be looking. They'd say that this was close. They'd shoot it down. They'd report it, whatever it is. It seems like this would be impossible to actually get your hands around.
But I'm not sure why you'd want to. What is the concern about something flying that high off the ground? If it's some kind of privacy concern, we already have manned aircraft. We already have invasion of privacy statutes, peeping Tom laws. Here in New York, we've got unlawful surveillance laws. So the technology itself shouldn't itself, I think, be regulated in a way that's inconsistent with what the actual legal interests are. What is it about a drone at 400 or 500 feet that's causing people to think I should shoot it down, or I need a law that protects me against it? I don't understand that.
I'm glad you've asked that, because I just happen to have that answer for you right here. And this comes in a couple of different articles that we found. We've even raised the possibility here around the newsroom. What happens when somebody puts a bomb on a drone? What happens when somebody puts a chemical on a drone and begins to start delivering it that way? I think that in this day and age, people are rightfully fearful of what somebody may do with this technology.
Well, we've seen terrorists use pressure cookers to hurt people, and obviously rental trucks and cell phones and just about anything you can think of. So when you're talking about someone who's ideologically motivated or who has malicious purposes, I don't think a regulation is going to be able to deal with that. You're really talking about national security or law enforcement against people who are committing a crime regardless of the technology. So the important thing in my mind is you would not want to put into place a restrictive law that will take away the benefits of the technology, that will restrict use in search and rescue, in agriculture, in cinematography, building inspection. I have a client that's actually gone out and done search and rescue and has found missing people using a drone. So we don't want to curtail these great benefits of a new technology before we understand what the problems are. And if there is a national security issue, that can be dealt with the way that other national security issues are dealt with.
I got about 45 seconds left. Would you say, though, that we are now beginning to walk into an area where lawyers, the FAA, the government, everybody is going to get involved, and this really is a new area of concern for the 21st century, for where we are now and beyond? The skies are only going to get more crowded.
Well, I think it's like the internet in the 90s. There's a ton of promise, and there are challenges that we are just beginning to appreciate. There's no one who could have predicted in the mid-90s all the problems that the internet has caused: cybersecurity, identity theft, defamation, cyberbullying, exploitation of minors. And we've dealt with those problems as they've come up. So I think it's important to understand what is the practical societal problem we're trying to solve with legislation or regulation before we put into place something we might regret.
All right, Brendan, you've gone ahead and done it here. 20 or so drones. I don't have one. Now I feel like I've got to go out and get one just to have one and give it a shot. There you go.
You'll enjoy it, I'm sure.
I am, no doubt. Yeah, all that spare time that I have, as a matter of fact, that's really going to get to use here. Brendan Schulman, pleasure to talk to you about this. A fascinating subject. We'll be in touch again. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. It is your money, and it's being wasted every single second of every single day by the wonks and weeblies in Washington. I'll let us detail for you who and whom is at this moment the most wasteful. It's coming up right here on MidPoint.